Okay, it looks like we're on.
Maybe, yeah, okay.
Just gonna test it. Yeah, so we are live on Facebook and looking forward to an awesome conversation.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
So I can watch the comments too.
Yes, actually I want to do that. Let me make this public. Yeah, so it's public. Okay, great. And then, okay, so for those who are just joining us, welcome. We'll be starting in just a few minutes. Very excited and honored to be having this opportunity. Okay. So, in Jewish tradition, there's a question, when is the appropriate time to say L'chaim? So just in case, we'll begin by saying L'chaim. L'chaim to life, to good health, many good things, and to hopefully an inspirational conversation. L'chaim.
L'chaim.
Okay, again, to those who are joining us, welcome. We're very excited to have you here on this really special occasion, a special day, and we're looking forward to a wonderful conversation. And we'll be starting in just a few minutes, just a few seconds, actually. A minute or two, let's put it that way.
Do you want people to check in and tell us that they're here? I noticed a few people are. Do you want them to let you know?
Yeah, we have Galit. Welcome, Galit. What an honor to have you here. And Judy and Art, from just up the block. In fact, Judy and Art, if you clap loud enough, I'll probably be able to hear you at Chabad of Northridge. And Millicent is joining us. Welcome. And I'm sure many others who haven't yet introduced themselves, but it's really wonderful to have everyone here. Okay, we'll give it another minute and then we will get started.
Okay.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Rabbi RIvkin, and I'm here with someone that I'm honored to consider a friend, Dr. Michelle Witkin. And we're here to be inspired. We're here to gain wisdom and knowledge and inspiration. That's certainly something which is very much needed during challenging times. And I'm very excited. When I first came out as a rabbi, a very wise older colleague said to me that the most important thing for a member of the clergy to have is a really good Rolodex. For those of you that are my age or younger, you might not know what a Rolodex is, but a really good Rolodex is very important. You have to have people that you can call and take advice. And I'm very fortunate. We have in our community amazing people, brilliant people with a lot of experience. And one of those people is Dr. Witkin. I really appreciate the opportunity over the years when people turn to me with various challenges and families and issues in the world of mental health. And you've always been so incredibly kind and generous with your time, with your wisdom. Sometimes I don't understand how you are able to put so much research into something. It's not just, I ask a question and then, there's like a one-line answer. Sometimes I'll have paragraphs and paragraphs, and I've already called this person and I've given them your name and a referral. And it's just an amazing amount of, to have wisdom and to be educated is one thing, but to be willing to share that wisdom. A person who is generous with their resources, with their wisdom, is really a tremendous blessing. So we as a community are very blessed to have you. And I think what we're doing this evening is really a continuation of that. it's using these challenging times
Right.
and the what it's forcing us to do, which is to hop on these platforms where we can hopefully reach so many people, to continue what you've always done, which is to be there for other people and to inspire them. So welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me to be here. It's funny that because I thought maybe I overwhelm you when I send you all that information normally. I'm glad to know I haven't.
No, absolutely. I appreciate it. And as much as I appreciate and we all appreciate and we respect all the impressive things that you've done, and they're all up there in the bio, to me, even more than that is the willingness and the kindness with which you give of yourself. So thank you. Okay.
It's my honor.
Of course, thank you. So we find ourselves in very, very challenging times, obviously. But just to get started, I mean, how are you doing? How's your family? How are you guys coping?
Probably pretty much the same as everybody else right now. I mean, this is not something, if you would have asked me a couple months ago if I thought that I would be taking my entire psychotherapy practice and moving it into a corner in my home, and that I wouldn't be going to my office and that I'd be going out in public with a mask, I would have said, I don't think I'd be able to handle that. But actually, what's amazing is how resilient humans are and how much we actually can handle. So, I mean, we're doing well. There's probably a little bit more bickering going on in my house than normal. And, I think we'll talk about why that's normal at some point in this conversation. But I've been able to continue my work, thank goodness, through technology. And so still there for the patients that I work with. My boys, who are both young adults, have been spending time volunteering at our local food pantry, and that's actually been really useful for them. It's a way to get out and serve the community and not just be stuck in the home. And my husband's work, Lauren's work, is considered essential, so he's actually had to go out and be in the office most days, which I think for him has been good, although it's been challenging because I think he does better not being in the house all day. So, yeah.
Yes.
But definitely I miss seeing people. I really miss seeing people in person.
Yeah, as we all do, of course, which is why it's nice to have things like this where we can get together and talk and see others. I did want to just mention to those of you that are joining us, what we're going to do in terms of the format is we'll have about a half-hour conversation, and then if anybody would like to ask any questions, any concerns you might have, there are two options for that. If you'd like to post something in the comments, which will obviously be public, you're welcome to ask a question that way. If you prefer to ask a private anonymous question, you can do so by going onto my Facebook page. Actually, you're on my Facebook page, and just messaging me privately, and I'll be able to see your question, and I'll be able to share it anonymously. And give us some feedback. We'd love to hear from you. Let's try to make this as interactive as possible. So you mentioned, you guys are also normal. There's a little bit of bickering going on, and that's just something that, I think for a lot of people today, there are things that we're experiencing as families, in our relationships, marriages, which are surprising. Somebody might say to themselves, I've been doing this for 15, 20, 30 years, and it's never been like this. Mm-hmm. And maybe you can talk a little bit about how people should process that, that level of stress and what it might be doing to us.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting one. I think first of all, I don't know if you remembered, but right around the time when we first started to do the whole shelter in place, being in our homes, there was a meme that was going around, and it said something along the lines of, your grandparents were called to war, you're being asked to go to your couch, you can handle this. And I think that actually undermined how it's actually really challenging to have your entire routine taken away from you and to not be interacting with people. We are social, And to not be doing that is incredibly challenging. And then there's so much uncertainty that's in our face right now. We don't know, exactly. We don't have solid answers on a lot of things, right? So stress is basically when you've got some kind of an external situation that's putting pressure on you, right? And stress is not always bad, by the way, right? Stress can be good. Stress, a little bit of pressure is part of what can make you perform better. So there's optimal amounts of stress. But for many of us right now, this is very challenging stress where we don't know exactly what's going to happen. We may be losing jobs. We may not be sure if we're going to be able to have food the next day. And so it's very, definitely challenging. And we're stuck at home. We're stuck at home. And we're with our families nonstop. So if you're a parent, you may be with your kids 24/7 now, and you're used to them going to school. So the question was, how do we cope with that, right?
Sure.
The question? Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say is very kindly to ourselves. I think many of us expect that we're just supposed to be able to handle this, and going back to that meme, that notion that you should just be able to handle this situation. Well, no, not necessarily. So what I would say is we're in a very abnormal situation. And in abnormal situations, there are normal things we can expect. We can expect ourselves to be shorter, more irritable, tireder, more emotional. You may see appetite changes, sleep changes, etc. So how do we cope with that? First of all, we need to be kind to ourselves that we're undergoing those experiences. And I think people can have a tendency to be cruel to themselves when they see that they're struggling. And so it's like, let's take that off. That just adds more. And then it's kind of getting back to basics. Like it's important for us to relax the expectations we have on ourselves right now, a little bit, sure, but also maintain a certain amount of normalcy. And that normalcy is really some very basic things: eating, sleeping, and moving. And we can talk more about that. But.
And perhaps I can add from the parent of young children's perspective. We had Passover, and we were. The crisis started, and then it was about 2 weeks until Passover vacation. And in the beginning, everyone was just completely thrown off their feet. And so the school did some minimal classes, but it was pretty relaxed.
Yeah.
And then we had Passover vacation, which was nice. It was interesting, but it was nice. And now they've come back, and our children go to Jewish schools, so they have secular instruction and religious instruction, and it's like very, very intense. And I was actually saying to my wife today, maybe we need to speak up and say to the administration, take it easy. We all have to be a little bit easier on ourselves, whether it comes to work, whether it comes to our mood, whether it comes to what we expect of our loved ones. In the case of parents, expect of our children, expect of our friends. Everyone has to be given a little bit more leeway because of this unique situation.
Right. That's very true. It's very true. I mean, that's something that comes up a lot with the families that I work with. I work with a lot of children and adolescents. So when you work with kids, you work with the whole family, and sure, just those expectations that a lot of the instructors have recognized that it's important for them to decrease some of the expectations on the kids.
Right.
But they're not always in touch with that. They're thinking about the standards that they need to meet and that kind of thing. So yeah, speaking up is actually important. If what you're seeing that the kids are being asked to do is really beyond what they're able to do right now, we only have so much,
right,
space to give.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so I think every parent has to be aware of what it is that their child has to give. It's been a lot of advice going around with my colleagues where we're just saying to people, recognize what it is you're able to give, and it's okay if all that you're really able to do is whatever the bare minimum is. That's okay right now. You have to be you have to honor that.
Right. So, here's something I was curious about. We've seen in the news that obviously everyone's focused on this virus and the effects of it, but what's often being ignored is that there are so many other health issues that perhaps are falling to the wayside. They gave examples of people who are having stroke symptoms or even heart attack symptoms who are not as quick to go to the hospital and take care of themselves. And so there's the secondary impact in terms of health. I was wondering if you're seeing some of that in your profession with I mean, obviously, it doesn't have to be your clients, of course, but what are you and your colleagues seeing? I would imagine that when it comes to mental health, there can definitely be a concern. People are cooped up together, and often they're the triggers for each other. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what you're seeing and what are some practical things what are some practical tools that you're giving people who struggle with each other and whose presence is sometimes a trigger for difficulties. What are some practical tools?
So it sounds like you're talking about a couple different things there, right?
I usually do. Sorry.
I did know that by now, right? So,
yes.
So one is you're wondering, are we seeing certain things with mental health, like
yes,
because of this? And then I think the other question is about, and then what are some things that people who are struggling with emotional health issues can do, or seeing their mental health? Okay, so yeah, so first of all, we're seeing the things that I talked about before, which is I'm going to go back to this notion of we're in an abnormal situation, right? This is a crisis. And I think it's important for us to really kind of say that we're in a crisis situation, and we're being called upon to do certain things to help our country and our fellow humans get through this. And when you're in an abnormal situation, there are certain things you can expect to see, and we're seeing those things, which are change in appetite, change in ways that people sleep, more irritability, more anxiousness, more hyper awareness and reactivity. So it impacts people emotionally, physically, behaviorally, cognitively. Right? It may be harder to concentrate too, and those are the normal things, right? So it's important to know that those may be going on, and that they're actually very appropriate to this situation. So what do you do about those things? Well, what you do about those things is you make sure that you kind of bring it back to the basics, which is put your sleep ahead of all things. And that doesn't mean that you lay in bed and you worry about whether you sleep or not, by the way, because I think a lot of times when people hear it's important to get good sleep, they then think, oh no, am I getting good sleep? And then they lay in bed and they worry about whether they're getting sleep or not. It's just more about having a regular routine. If you don't fall asleep, fine, right? But have a regular routine for it. Make sure that you're eating in a healthy way, or as healthy as you can. Eat regularly. A lot of people are putting off when they're eating right now. I talk to people who are sleeping till very late, and then they're missing meals and they don't feel good. So we do need food to survive and to feel well. And then we also need to move our bodies. And that's one of the challenges of this situation, right? Because we can end up in the home most of the day, especially when we had all that rain and the clouds. So we're really lucky right now. We've got a lot of sunshine. So even just getting out for a little bit and moving your body in some way. There's one person I work with, they just run up and down their stairs to move their body. Like, this is important for our emotional well-being as much as our physical well-being. Our brains depend on us moving our bodies. Okay. So, but then in terms of other mental health things that aren't within the norm, so to speak, we're seeing if somebody was already struggling with anxiety, let's say, or depression, there's more of an exacerbation in symptoms now. So, and that's because, right, anytime that routine changes, are you hearing an echo, by the way, or are we okay?
No, I'm hearing it fine. Maybe some of our audience can chime in and let us know if there's anything we need to adjust.
Okay. Yeah, please let us know, guys. So, so what was I saying? I was saying, yeah. So anytime that we have a change in our routine, or we don't feel well, or we're not sleeping as well, which, like I said, that's one of the normal things that happens with this. Then what happens is we'll start to see people's symptoms escalate. Right. So people may be more dysregulated, more uncomfortable, struggling more than they normally do. And if that's the case, people actually may need to get some mental health care. And I think people might think that therapists might not be available right now, but the majority of us have actually moved to telehealth. So you can see us.
Right.
Yeah.
And perhaps in many ways they're even more accessible because instead of having to go through an hour of traffic, you get on your Zoom with your therapist, and you can have a very meaningful conversation. Are you finding that the over technology session is comparable to an in-person experience?
Well, it's interesting because for the kind of work that I do, I treat people who are struggling with pretty severe anxiety and obsessive compulsive disorder. So it actually, research has shown with this particular kind of work that I do that it's incredibly helpful because a lot of times when people are struggling with anxiety or with obsessions and compulsions, a lot of what they're doing is at home. And so if I'm in their house on their laptop, they can take me around and I can do more practices with them in their home. Yeah. So, but okay, so that's one benefit of it. And actually for a lot of teens and kids, they're quite comfortable being in their house talking to a therapist, right? So there's a comfort level.
Right.
But for us as therapists, there's a little more difficulty. Like I can't see a person's whole body to assess them. So I can't see how they're walking. I can't necessarily tell. I can't always read their expressions as well. And so sometimes there's a little bit of a disconnect there, and so it can be exhausting for both people. Like we don't usually sit and stare at one another in a camera when we have conversations. We look away, but in a situation like this where you're doing telehealth, you're staring at one another more, and it can be a little more tiring too.
Sure. I just read a fascinating article today, how spending hours and hours in Zoom meetings is actually incredibly exhausting because there are so many things that you have to do, besides the fact that very often you have multiple screens in front of you and there's all these distractions and you're always having to refocus yourself. And they were actually suggesting that, contrary to what one might think, we might consider when possible not having necessarily a face-to-face meeting, but it could even be a phone conversation. Phone conversations are much less taxing mentally, and often you're able to focus more when you don't have to do the whole visual thing.
Right. Is that the research? I'm sorry, I'm talking over you.
No, go ahead.
I was wondering if that was the research out of Stanford University that you were talking about. Very
possibly. I have to admit, I didn't notice exactly. It was an article today on the BBC, so they may have been. But it's interesting because we've always said that an in-person conversation is much more meaningful and much deeper than over the phone. I'm sure when phones came out, people were really upset. I'm not seeing anybody, and we would think that having the opportunity to see each other would overcome some of the negatives of talking over the phone. But there can be a downside in terms of how exhausting it is to have the face-to-face conversations. Right. On the subject of technology, Obviously, as a parent of children, of teenagers, this is something that we think about all the time. The impact of technology on our children. Every parent is, I think, constantly making, life-changing decisions regarding regarding technology and what, how much and what and how much time. And we've always understood from the various studies that when it comes to stress and anxiety, reading a book or being outside, doing something off a screen is so much healthier than being in front of a screen. Even if it's reading a book on a screen versus reading a paper book, reading the paper book is that much healthier. And so we could, 3 months ago, we could create certain boundaries and guidelines, and you can have a half hour of technology, an hour of technology, whatever it is, depending on the child. And today it's like all of that has flown out the window, and out of necessity, our children's very religious schools are now like, your kids have to be on the computers for 7-8 hours a day. And it's like, whoa. And the question is, with the concern specifically about anxiety, how do you balance the need to be in communication with people and obviously to be interacting with the world and the increase that it might cause in terms of anxiety and depression?
Right. Well, what I'm going to say is going to differ a little bit from what it was that you were saying about that it's healthier to not be on a screen, because first of all, the research is kind of mixed about whether the amount of screen time is tied to depression or anxiety or not. There's mixed research on that, and I think some of the studies that have been done look a little bit more at social media and et cetera. So what I can say is that there are some times when it's very, very healthy to be on a screen, actually, right? Because we may have access to learning new skills on a screen. We may have access to our education on a screen. We may have access to being able to interact socially. Actually, for kids and teenagers, this may be a really healthy way for them to interact with their friends, because they need to have that connection. That connection is important. And being able to, one of the things that we forget, right? You and I, we didn't grow up in this digital generation. And so we look at it in a different way. And one of the things that we don't necessarily recognize is that for our children, this for them is a really valid and valuable way to connect.
Right.
Yeah. So, but I think that what it comes down to, though, is a balance, right? Doing anything, doing anything. Somebody said they lost us. Does that mean they can't hear us anymore? Or?
I don't know. I mean, it seems like it's still streaming.
Okay.
So hopefully they can still hear us.
Okay. So it's about balance. And if you think about it, if we do anything to the exclusion of anything else, then that can be unhealthy for us, right? So yes, right now our children have to be learning online. That's the way, or maybe they're getting packets of information that are being printed out and they're working on that. But so we have to recognize, okay, there can be a benefit to doing the video games, or there can be a benefit to the online teaching, and there can be a benefit to meeting online with their friends. And thank you, Jennifer. and at the same time, if there's not a balance of, yes, I sit down with a book, or I get outside and outdoors to do things, or I spend quiet time away from technology to be with myself and to daydream, or to be with my family and interact with them, right? That's where we've got a problem. So I would say don't worry too much if the kids need to be spending time doing that academically. And then you want to help them to find other pursuits too.
Okay. Well,
that was a long answer.
That was great. It was great. And I agree with Jennifer. Definitely the content. We can't hear the sound quality, but the content, right on. Thank you. So obviously, what's underlying all of this, and what's underlying all of these conversations are the restrictions that have been put in place for the purpose of protecting human life. And I should mention, as a rabbi, that from a Jewish perspective, and I believe many people feel this way, but Judaism is adamant about this, there is nothing more precious than human life. And so there is nothing that ever comes before human life, with very few exceptions. Certainly in the religious world, we have put everything on hold. We haven't had services, we haven't had programs. Passover was, it was very difficult, everyone on their own. And the term that everyone is using, and this is the term that's out there by all the health professionals, it's about social distancing, right? We have to social distance in order to save lives. And hopefully it's doing what it's supposed to do. Hopefully we're flattening the curve. But I was wondering what your thoughts were on the term social distancing, because I feel like humans are really social creatures, and we thrive on social interaction. And is it really necessary to focus on the social distancing, or maybe it can be more about just physical distancing? And are there ways to compensate, perhaps, for the social separation?
Yeah.
You have any thoughts on that?
Oh yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up, because actually at least in my community of colleagues, we have been talking since the very beginning of this, like, who came up with the term social distancing? Right. Social distancing is not what we want right now. We need physical distancing. And in fact, that is what some of my colleagues have said. They've written articles and made public statements that, no, this is not about social distancing. What we need right now is we need physical distancing with social connection. And that's why I think you see a lot of people are taking to Zoom more to connect. Or you've probably heard about some of these drive-by birthday celebrations. Yes. Yeah, I was invited. My kids are teasing me. I was invited to my first drive-by on Sunday.
There you go.
And we human beings, we need to be connected with each other. We were never meant to go it alone. We thrive when we're socially connected. Actually, if you're struggling with depression, we know one of the most important things that you can have is connection to another human being. So, and that doesn't necessarily have to be in person. That can be a text. That can be over video meeting. That can be over a call. That can be letters.
Right.
So yeah, I completely agree with you.
Yeah, and I think if there's something, perhaps that we could come away with as a community from this conversation, is maybe there needs to be an organized effort. And you know what? This is something we're going to do. We're going to create an organized effort of thinking of people in the community who are really suffering from the social distancing. Mm-hmm. And we can have volunteers, sign up to call them and to check in with them. And it's not necessarily about giving them anything or baking them a cake. It's just about allowing for there to be those connections, because I think a lot of what community centers provide, synagogues and churches and so on, is they provide a place for people to have community, to have friends, to socially interact. And a lot of people are really struggling in that regard. And so we need to find a way to compensate for that. So
this is why I adore you. This is one of the many.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. So, in the description that we have about you, it's all about your work as a psychologist, as a mental health professional, but you also have a very strong, religious connection. You're very involved in the Jewish community. You and your family are very proud of your Judaism. I've always admired the fact that when you travel, you make a point to incorporate Jewish experiences, and you're always telling me about the synagogues and the communities. And that's such a beautiful thing. I always tell people as a rabbi that you can give your family such an incredible message. There is a thing called travel. You may have all forgotten about it, but one day we're going to get back on planes. We're going to travel places. And again, speaking to the Jewish community, when we make a point to have those experiences, even when we're traveling, it can be something very, very special. You're also involved in synagogue and in Torah study. And so I was wondering, are there things that you've learned, that you've been inspired by Judaism over the years, that you feel can be a really powerful message for people today in terms of coping with all of this?
Yeah.
Hope I'm not putting you on the spot.
No. Actually, I was just thinking about how many Chabads I've visited all over the world because you've helped connect us. It's quite an experience to have dinner with a Chabad rabbi in Colombia.
Yes.
Yeah. So one of the things I think is so important is there's this. My whole life and still today, my family's always made this very sacred space on Friday nights, and continuing to have that time where we just sort of separate from everything else that we've been doing. I stop and I actually, because of Tippy taught me at a challah bake several years back to make challah. So I bake a fresh challah every Friday.
Wow.
And when I start doing that, that's my signal that I'm separating into something different. This time is different. And we stop what we're doing and there's no other distractions. And we sit down together for our Shabbat meal. And so that time has been incredibly important. I think something else too, something I picked up my whole life in terms of my Jewish studies, what's always been incredibly important has been that commitment to others, to the world and to other human beings, and I think you can see that in, my boys have chosen to be of service during this time. And one of the things that's been really important to me and that I continue to do is to be of service. I run an OCD support group. I donate my time to do that. I do that twice a month. And we usually meet live. And recently we moved to a hospital setting to do this, the education center of our local hospital. And the hospital closed down the education center, understandably, right? We can't meet in person. And I thought, well, we can't not meet. It's important that we meet. And we're getting together and still having our support group meetings. And thank goodness one of my group members donated a special Zoom account for us to do it. I couldn't get my platform to work. And so continuing to be of service to community. And I find also just in the work that I do with the individuals that I work with, people I work with really struggle because I work with OCD and anxiety. They struggle with their thoughts and with the feelings that they have, and they're trying to push them away, and they get angry with themselves that they struggle. And I think one of the things that Judaism has taught me is that it's okay to struggle. And that basically it's okay to be human. Right. And you and I were talking before we started how that really underlays like so much of the work that I do. And I have the privilege of working with so many people of many different spiritual backgrounds and cultural backgrounds. But the things that I've learned and continue to learn, they seem to flow through this work that I do that seems to be very secular work, but there's a lot of spirituality in there.
Right. Wow, that's amazing. Very special. It's interesting. You mentioned about embracing the struggle. So we were speaking earlier before we went live that there's actually a whole body of work called the Tanya, which talks about the struggle. In fact, the book is called the Book of the Struggler. And we have a tradition that the author, the rabbi who authored this, initially he wrote a book called the Book for the Tzaddikim, the Book for the Righteous.
Yeah.
And then he realized this is not for the world. And they say he burned it. He destroyed it because he felt like that would offer an unrealistic expectation for people. Then he wrote a book called the Book for the Struggler. And this is a book which has become, hundreds of thousands of people today continue to study this. And it's not just about this book. It's the concept that it's so important, it's so healthy to embrace what it means to be human, and to embrace that we are, we are imperfect, and we are dealt very, very, very difficult challenges. It could be on a personal level, and certainly the world is dealing now with a tremendous challenge. And to really be able to embrace that is very important.
Yeah.
Something else that I was thinking about from Jewish tradition is, we have this concept that it's in Judaism, it's very important to be in a positive state, right? It's not just in Judaism, in general, it's important to be in a positive state. But I think often in normal times, we think of that as a nice thing. It's good. If you can be inspired, if you can be in a good mood, it's a good thing. But it's not the end of the world. You can function. Judaism actually makes happiness. And when I say happiness, I don't mean going out and partying necessarily. Happiness is a state of mind, a positive state of mind. Judaism makes it an obligation. Even with Hashem b'simcha, we have an obligation to be in a positive state. And I think that obligation is more relevant today than ever before. And I say to myself, and I really try and do this, although I'm not always successful, and I encourage others to think about this as well. In these challenging times, where literally every single thing about our life is challenged. Our employment is challenged. Our relationships are challenged. We're nervous about the future. Our physical health is challenged. Our mental health is challenged. It is an absolute obligation. Before we do anything, we ask ourselves, is this going to lift me up, or is this going to push me down? Mm-hmm. And if it's something which is going to push you down that you don't have to do, I mean, obviously there are things that pull us down that we have to engage in. But if it's just something optional, right? If we're going to read something or watch something which is very, very upsetting and it's not really necessary, today there's an obligation, especially if we're in a place of influence, a parent or an educator, whatever it is. We have an obligation to be in that positive frame of mind, because that's what gives us, that's the fuel. Inspiration is the fuel to be able to deal with challenges. I was wondering if you had any thoughts in that regard. You can disagree with me.
Well, I think that if we strive to be happy all the time, that we're gonna struggle to do that, and we're gonna fall short and make ourselves miserable in the process. But I don't think that that's what you're saying. I mean, what I talk with people about is you have a choice. You have a choice with how you react to situations, to either be moving in the direction of something that is closer to your values and closer to what's meaningful to you, right? So if you're at that choice point, you can choose something that may be harder, but it's going to take you closer to what you value in life, or you can make a choice to do something that's going to take you away from that. And I think it's a similar perspective. I think we just say it in slightly different ways.
You always say it in a much more eloquent way. Okay, so I want to just remind everyone, if there's anyone, obviously we appreciate all the feedback, the comments, the missing the shul. We also miss the shul, although I get to be in the shul, but being in the shul without all of you is just not the shul. But I remember what my mentor told me before I moved out to be the rabbi here. He said, remember, it's all about people. It's not about what kind of building you build or what kind of facility you have. It's about the people. So to be in the facility, not to have the people is just. But if anybody has any questions for Dr. Witkin, if there's anything you wanted to bring up, anything you'd like us to talk about,
they can just type that in the comments. Just type that in the comments if they have a question.
Yes, exactly. And if for some reason the individual would like to keep their question private, they're welcome to send it to me as a message on my Facebook page. I'm just looking to see if we have any messages here. Okay, and we'd love to hear your feedback. If there's anything you'd like Dr. Witkin to address in the next few minutes that we have.
Do you want to talk about normal anxiety versus when to reach out for help?
Please. That's actually a very important topic. I was going to ask you about that. Please, Go ahead.
So one of the things that you and I had talked earlier about what's normal, what's not normal, and So some people think that the word anxiety means that we're they think of anxiety as a bad thing, and anxiety is not a bad thing in and of itself. Actually, anxiety can be quite good, right? Anxiety is when we experience nervousness, and worry, and and, and it provokes us to react to a potential danger, right? So it's really good to be anxious if you're about to get hit by a car, right? Because you're going to jump out of the way. And it's good to have some anxiety if you're about to have a test, because it helps you prepare, right? The right amount of anxiety. So we have this normal anxiety, and we may even have a little bit of extra of that right now. Okay. But when is it more than is okay, or even what we'd expect under these circumstances? So I always say that it's when the anxiety is getting in the way of your ability to function. So if the anxieties and the worries aren't getting put to rest by talking and reaching out to somebody and getting reassurance, that might be a sign, particularly like if you see a loved one asking you the same questions over and over again. Are you sure I'm not going to get sick? Are you sure I'm not going to get sick? Are you sure this isn't going to happen? And you've been over this umpteen times. This is a sign that the person is needing more than just support and talking. Some of the people who I've had the opportunity to come in contact with are literally checking themselves constantly for signs of illness right now. And any little thing that they feel, they automatically are jumping to, I've got COVID and I'm dying, or I'm having a heart attack and I'm dying. And they're constantly reaching out for reassurance. So if there's a lot of that going on, it's a repeated pattern, that might be a sign. If a person is so busy ruminating in their head and worrying that they're not able to take care of basic functions, they're not eating, they're not sleeping, they're not able to, if you're a parent and you're not able to interact or take care of the kids, that might be a sign. Not being able to get out of bed, that would be, it's like, I can't even face the anxiety. That would be another sign. So just a few things to be on the lookout for.
And if someone is struggling or knows someone who's struggling in this regard, and they haven't in the past ever reached out to a mental health professional, what is the process? How does that work? Do they just reach out to their primary care physician, or what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, that's a good question. People can do that in a number of ways. For sure, you can contact your primary care physician and see if there's somebody that they like to refer to. And they may be able to give you names. Like there are certain doctors who refer to me. Mm-hmm. You can also take a look, reach out to your insurance company and see who are the providers that your insurance company covers. Right now, with most people doing telehealth, actually, you can see anybody in the state of California pretty much who's doing telehealth, because if they're licensed in your state, then they can see you. Word of mouth is good. If you know somebody who's seeing a therapist, you can always ask them. I believe in searching the internet too. Particularly for anxiety issues. The Anxiety and Depression Association of America is a very good resource. They have a Find a Therapist tool that you can use, and so does the American Psychological Association. The California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists does. So you can begin a search by going on to some of these sites and seeing who these people are. And when you reach out, I encourage people, interview the therapist. People, I think, are really quick to feel like they have to go and see the first person that they call. And it's important to know that you're going to have a relationship with this person. Make sure that you speak to them ahead of time and that you feel like, yeah, I feel like I could connect with this person. So.
Okay, great. See, we have a question here from Jennifer. Are you able to see her question?
Yeah, I can see it. You want to read it out loud for people in case
Sure.
they don't?
Sure, absolutely. So Jennifer writes, at times with anxiety or depression, it's as if the mind turns in on itself in a terrible loop, like the mind is eating itself, particularly lying in bed at night without distractions. Any suggestions of how to interrupt that unhealthy loop, whether for oneself or in support of another?
Yeah.
That's a great question.
Yeah. A lot of times this happens with what if worries. And so what can happen is that when we have a thought come into our head that is upsetting to us, we feel compelled as human beings that, oh, this is a problem to solve. I need to stick with it. Right? And so it's sort of a natural inclination to keep on following that worry, right? So what I tell people is that you cannot stop certain thoughts from coming into your head or certain worries from coming into your head. But what you are in control over is recognizing that you don't necessarily have to follow that thought down the rabbit hole, so to speak, and problem solve. Because what will happen is that you'll get stuck in this endless loop, like Jennifer is describing, of the mind just eating itself. And it actually ends up making us feel worse. So one of the things that we can do is recognize, like, oh, I'm having that thought, and I don't necessarily have to follow it, even though it's my inclination to do that. And what I can do instead is say, okay, I'm having that thought, but then bring myself right back to here. Like, what's really happening now? Do I really have that problem now? Right? I talk about two different problems, myself and my colleagues. There's two different kinds of worries. You've got the kind of worry that is, I have a problem right now. And when you have a problem right now, like I need food, right? I need to problem solve on how I'm going to get that food. And then the other type of worry is, what if I have, and then it's always followed by a catastrophe of some sort, right? Our brain doesn't go, what if I win the lottery tomorrow? It generally says something terrible. And so it's recognizing that this is your brain's invitation to engage in a whole lot of worry that's not going to help you. It's going to make you feel worse. So if you can recognize it as, oh, there's that thing, I don't have to do that right now, I don't have that problem, pull yourself out of the loop and choose to do something else that's more meaningful to you. Now, if you're lying in bed and it just won't leave you alone, there's another little tool you can use, which is something that we call worry time. What you can say is, all right, maybe I need to worry about that, but I'm going to wait and I'm going to worry about that instead tomorrow at this time. And then what you do is tomorrow at that time, you set aside, for kids, I usually say about 10 minutes. For adults, I say about 20. And you either write down the worries, or you say them out loud in the mirror, or you record them. And you just basically say the worry. I'm worried this, I'm worried that, I'm worried this, without trying to problem solve it, just saying the worry. But the catch is that you have to fill the entire 20 minutes, if you're an adult, with that worry. And what'll happen usually is you get to the end of your worries in a short period of time, and then you got to repeat, and then you have to repeat. You can guess what happens when you do that. You start to get bored. And it tends to help us let go of it.
That's fascinating. That is absolutely fascinating. Wow. Okay. Can you give us some more of those? I mean, that is just such an amazing practical exercise, because I think all of us, especially now, I actually was saying to a friend the other day, I'm like, I said, what happened to me suddenly? It used to be I'd get up early in the morning, I'd fall back asleep. It just doesn't happen anymore. There's all these concerns that we have. Yeah. And that is really, really incredible.
Yeah. Kenneth says singing an uplifting song is very helpful. Praying can be effective. I'm going to say yes, but. So yeah, singing. If you can say, no, I'm not going to go there, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sing, or I'm going to go ahead and pray, and you're able to go into that instead. Beautiful. For some people, what happens is they'll use that, though, to try to distract themselves from an unpleasant thought or something that an unpleasant worry. And sometimes it can backfire and the worry keeps coming back over and over and over again. So what some people will do is they'll actually sing their worries, or they'll write a poem, a silly poem about their worries, which starts to detach them from the gloom and doom that they tend to have.
Fascinating.
Try singing your worries to Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Do you know that tune?
Of course. I grew up in America. It's interesting that because I think very often, like Kenneth, and I've always embraced that approach of just trying to fill the box, fill the mind with positive thoughts and things that lift you up and lists of gratitude and so on. But what you're saying is that there are some times where you just have to deal with whatever it is that's getting to you. And with an exercise like this, you focus on it, you deal with it, you embrace it, and then you're able to perhaps have a different experience, which is really remarkable.
Think about this. Whatever we resist persists. So if I say to you, do not think about a pink elephant, what'd you just do? Did you think pink elephant? Don't think about a pink elephant. Sometimes what happens is if we try really hard not to think about something that's bothering us, we'll only think about it more. So in that case, it's okay, then I'm gonna resist. Let it be there, right? But this is an attitude of I'm accepting it, I'm allowing it to be there. Well, now I'm not signaling to my brain that this is a danger. When you fight it, you signal to your brain, this is a danger.
Right.
And when you say, fine, you can be there. In fact, I'm going to sing about you, or I'm going to just like really focus on you hard. Your mind goes, I guess that's not so important.
Right. And I would imagine that when you start this 20-minute exercise, you think to yourself, of course I could think about this for 20 minutes. I think about it for hours when I'm laying in bed. And then when you get through 10 minutes and you can't even deal with it anymore, you realize that this was really much smaller, perhaps, than you imagined. It wasn't as insurmountable.
Yeah.
Wow, that's very powerful.
Harriet, I'm glad that talking to your family and friends helps, because that's a really healthy sign. That's awesome.
Yeah. Perhaps in the last few minutes that we have, obviously we're talking about there are many challenges that people are dealing with and things that people are anxious about. But is there anything perhaps in what the world is experiencing and the unique things that we're going through? Are there perhaps some positives that you think we might come away with when all this is behind us?
Well, as I mentioned to you earlier, we're all going to be a whole lot better at using technology. For those of you who don't know, this man has taught himself so much technology in the past month that it's mind-blowing. I think that what I hope and what I think is that we're going to have more appreciation of small pleasures. The phone call with a friend, the little gifts that someone leaves on our doorstep, a walk in nature. I just think that those things we're going to have appreciation for those. And I also think that especially initially, when we're out there in the world interacting and being with people, we're going to be like, thank goodness, there's going to be great appreciation for being with other human beings.
Sure. And being, I'm just thinking how much we took advantage of the opportunity to go to the synagogue and pray with other people and sit at a kiddush and have some gefilte fish. I never thought that would be something that I would yearn for. That was just something we do. We go to shul on Shabbos and we eat cholent and we sit around. And I just hope we'll be able to find a way to maintain the appreciation, because we have this way of very, very short memories, and then there's going to be new anxieties and getting back to real life.
Right.
But hopefully we'll be able to hold on to some of that.
Yeah, that will be interesting to see.
Yes. Okay, Dr. Witkin, I think on behalf of all for myself, and certainly on behalf of all who have tuned in, this has been very, very enjoyable. Although we've known each other for many years, I've never had the opportunity to sit and talk to you for a full uninterrupted hour.
I know.
So, this is great. This was really special. We'll definitely have to do it again. I really appreciate your time and expertise, and this is not just on my behalf, but on behalf of everyone who's tuning in. And want to wish you and your family and your loved ones good health and happiness and a sense of peace. And may Hashem bless you in the work that you do. Very, very sacred work of helping other people and bringing happiness to their lives. And we should all be healthy, and we should have a lot of good news to share with each other.
Yeah.
So
thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you to everybody who joined in. It's been a pleasure. We've seen all of your comments, and it's just been really nice to have this time with you, Rabbi, and with all the people who have listened with us this evening.
Thank you so much. And of course, my best to your family, please.
Thank you, and yours too.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.